Welcome everyone to our new format, Tiny Box Dialogues. These videos were started to share expertise in bite-sized pieces with real examples from real people with real stories. Thank you, Dorothea. We have asked people in the audience to please use the Q&A for questions, because that allows us to document the questions and address them. If we don't get them to them in the session, we can address them in the YouTube later. So please use the Q&A functionality if you have any questions. I've also asked Laura Schulte to join us because she's worked with founders who are approaching IPO and positioning themselves with their stakeholders, which is also relevant to founders. So welcome both. Dorothea, you are an executive coach who is the founder of Volate, which we'll come to soon, where you teach founders how to become CEOs and grow with their business. Now, you have an interesting story yourself, working with 30 startups, scale-ups, writing books on the topic, inspiring people from the stage. How did you end up in this line of work?
Well, first of all, thanks for the wonderful introduction. This was a long story. Actually, I have been going the way from CEO to founder, just the opposite way of what I'm helping founders to do. And the background is that for the last 20 years, I've been a leader in founder-led organizations. And I realized that in all these organizations, leadership was, a very implicit topic. I myself have been a very, in the end, intuitive leader for a long time. Leadership as such is not a topic, a real topic, but it's always there. Mm-hmm. And I saw a huge need for coaching founders into their role, helping them to learn leadership and get a broad understanding, because it has such a high impact. And actually, there were two very distinct experiences that showed me how important leadership education is. And I think the first one was the first time I became a leader, I was just 16, taking over a scouting group. Mm-hmm. And I was thrown into that without any education and felt quite insecure. And this helplessness and what do I do in this role, what I'm meant to create, was something I had to deal with. Mm-hmm. And the other experience was my very first leader, who was really like more the toxic leader. He was a moody guy, control freak. I mean, when he was in a bad mood, everybody was tiptoeing on the floor. So my idea was, okay, give something back from your own experience in leading. And I think people always like to be in my teams. I help to develop a lot of people, have great connections and to give that back to the community and help founders make their way, decrease that insecurity of leadership and make them really create good companies. That's what's driving me. That's my backstory.
I think you're the example of those people who have had the worst leaders and therefore know what good leaders should look like. Because I think we can all relate to that micromanaging, toxic type of leadership, especially in corporate culture. Now, you have a great motto. Anyone can learn to become a CEO and make themselves and their company fly, which relates to your company name, Volate. So can you tell us a little bit about that before we get kicking off into the real call to actions?
Yeah, Volate actually means fly. It's Latin. It's the plural of flying. So I want to have people fly. Yeah, and my logo is an eagle. And maybe a little bit about that. I always loved eagles, and actually, as a child, I wanted to become a falconer. And I really yes, I had a book about knights who were doing that, and it was just cool. But I've always been amazed by eagles because they're both powerful and serene. They are farsighted and still have a strong focus. And by that, they're actually an ideal of a good leader. And they have this amazing ability to take the turmoils, the energy of the turmoils, sense where things are changing, and then fly higher and higher. And this is kind of the ideal I would love to bring founders to, make them eagles, to be able to steer the companies higher and higher.
Fantastic. Love that analogy. So let's get to the crux of the problem. So I imagine a big problem for founders, in my experience with founders, is that they start solo or with a team of 2 to 3 and do everything themselves from the ground up. So suddenly they're managing teams and they're managing people who are doing the tasks they used to do. So that's got to be tough. How do you inspire them? What is the main reason you realize that they need help, especially because they're starting from so low to going higher?
Yeah, it's indeed a long story, a long journey they go through. And what I realized in the different stages I had and founded companies, that are 4 very distinct stages. You have the stage of departure, where actually everything you do is work on product market fit. There you have very closely knit teams. Leadership does not really take place there because you're so symbiotic as a team. Mm-hmm. And then you move to the takeoff. If everything goes well, sales take off. So all the focus is to the outside, selling stuff, growing as fast as possible. And in these stages, the classical founder with this hands-on approach, I do everything, my energy comes from doing things myself, is quite helpful. But this is shifting significantly when the companies move to the 3rd stage, the turbulences. And the turbulences have actually quite specific size, which is the number of founders times 15 to 25 employees. So for 2 founders, it would be around 40. In this stage, the company has become so complex that leading directly doesn't work anymore. So in this phase of turbulences, it's all about creating structure and institutionalizing yourself as a founder. So you make the company independent of yourself. And only if you manage that, you will reach the 4th stage, which is a flying high, where they then can refocus on innovation, creating new markets. But that's the base. And in the transition from the 2nd to the 3rd stage, there you have to move from founder to CEO, from doing everything yourself towards creating organizations and help people to do everything. And that's a huge step.
Yeah, an overwhelming step, I'm sure, managing a team at that level. Yeah. So that is relevant to aspiring founders, and we might have some of them on the call, and I hope they will ask questions on the Q&A. So first things first, where do they start? So say they're in between stages 2 and 3. They know they're moving from founder to CEO. They're hiring exponentially. Where do they start to make that transition?
Well, actually, the first thing, if you want to lead very well, you first have to understand yourself. So a very first important step, and that's something you can do even before you're founding, is start to lead yourself. Really understand your strengths and weaknesses, your inner drivers, your limiting beliefs, and then use these strengths to build the team. But understanding yourself is the first step. The next step is then to really start leading individuals, which is in the 1st and 2nd stage. When your team is building, you have to learn how to hand over responsibility, how to give feedback, how to develop people. This helps your team to go, and then it goes. And I think that are the first and most important steps at the beginning.
This reminds me of, I once wrote an article on expert promotions, because what really frustrated me in the corporate world, and especially in banking, is that the minute you get promoted, you get people management. You haven't been trained for people management, but you're so good at your job, you get promoted, and the promotion comes with people management. And you just think, why are they not teaching them the skills before giving them a team of people? Just because you know how to do a job does not mean that you know how to lead people to do that job, right? And founders are a little bit different because they've actually done the job from the beginning, right? So which area of leadership do you feel is the most underrated in a leadership team, that's most useful to a founder who's doing this, going through this transition?
What I realized in working with teams, and I usually work with individual founders, but also with the founder team, is that creating high performance founder leadership teams is most undervalued. Because in the beginning, they work very closely, so they feel as a strong team. But as they go, the founders start to end up in different silos, and they lose track of their being a team. And therefore, in the 2nd to 3rd stage, to really coming back and creating a high performance leadership team where people are really having strong mutual relationships that help them to solve problems together is very important. And this is often lost out of sight, which is really dangerous, because this is when conflicts are creeping in, and you see founders leaving teams, which is always a pity, because the energy of a founder is something that is so helpful to a company.
Mm-hmm. That must be tough. That must be tough. I think I've seen that actually happen. Now that you mention it, I'm like, oh yes, that founder left that company. That's exactly what
Yeah, that can happen.
they grew too fast, right? And they didn't know how to split up the roles effectively for their different teams. Very interesting. Sorry, Laura, you were going to say?
Yeah, I mean, it does happen, and it's sometimes it can be a positive if it's the right move, but as you say, it's a loss of the momentum and that original purpose. And when we get back to, you know, my area of backstories and what drives us to lead as we do, there's that passion in there and that purpose. And I think when you talk about this reaching this next phase, it impacts their ability to grow. When there's ever a big shift like that, that's a disruption within the company itself, at least what I've experienced. And what do you think, Dorothea, is this, what can help them move past this this stalled growth? Because that's really difficult. What can they do to avoid that kind of dilemma?
Well, I mean, it's first of all working on the relationships in the founder team, or then in the larger leadership team, and being very aware that creating a team is not just working on skills, on stuff together, but is really forming strong bonds. So take time for growing as a team would help a lot, and being aware that this time is valuable, even if you don't work at that time. So it's a different definition of work that is helpful here. And the other thing is that being aware that this, I mean, what the founders bring in, and I think that's the secret sauce of founders, is the entrepreneurial spirit. And it's proven that founder-led companies, where founders make that transition from founder to CEO to leading an organization and not just doing stuff, that these companies are on average much more successful than companies where there's a handover to operational management. So it has a value for founders to stay, and this should be an incentive to really take the journey, take the leadership journey, and develop on the whole path. Yeah.
But this isn't necessarily something that comes naturally to every single founder. A founder who has this, as Raj was saying, this hands-on approach. I mean, these are these stories that I hear that amaze me. These chapters, call them a chapter of success in a hero's journey, but there are chapters of failure too, and it's the ones where you overcome that really move you on. And what do you think can move them? Like, if you had to tell us a little bit more about leading yourself, that's where it comes down to. How do you lead yourself and yet have a chance to move forward? What are the first steps?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a lot leading yourself. It's about eternal learning. I mean, the big leaders that create this transition, they are willing to transform themselves, I think, every 3 to 6 months. That's the average. So you have to constantly work on, what are my strengths? What is keeping me from giving up my power? What is limiting me from handing over responsibility is a big question. So what are my limiting beliefs? What's driving me, where I'm standing in my own way? So these are questions. Then the self-leadership also has to, if you start to understand yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses, you will be able to see the strengths and weaknesses, and especially the strengths in other people as well. So dealing with yourself, understanding yourself, is the basis for understanding other people, which then helps you to really develop them to their best and take out the best of them, which is exactly the process of leading yourself, leading individuals, and then making the company grow. Because if you grow yourself, if you grow people, the growth will come. Yeah.
And you mentioned limiting beliefs. What do you mean by limiting beliefs, and where do those come from?
Well, actually, limiting beliefs often come from an early childhood. It's a way of how we adapted to environment, how we thought people will love us. And typical limiting beliefs I see in coachings as like, only I'm able to do that. I have to take all the responsibility. I can't trust anybody. Ooh. So yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, just yesterday I had such a coaching where, I mean, this was the whole set. And the person was really wondering why I'm not able to hand over responsibility. Yes, but these are the brackets she had in her mind that kept her from handing over. So these limiting beliefs usually keep you from really handing over responsibility. And also the other thing is that most people, I think probably everybody, is lacking a good grip of your deepest values. And that's an exercise I love to do with the founders. And because the problem is, if you don't know your values and your deepest values, and then there's a tendency that if you work against your values, which you don't know, you're always working against your own energy, which means you are moving towards burnout. You're an energy low, and on energy low, you actually can't lead effectively. If you're an energy low, you're just on a tunnel. You're in the fight, flight, freeze emotion, and then you can't work with a team. That's just impossible. And so having a good energy managing, having a good understanding, be in balance, this is the prerequisite to really then implement in the right way all these leadership tools. Yeah.
That's a very different vision than the eagle soaring with just slight movements of feathers to get the uplift. Yeah, I can see the difference there.
Question from the audience, so I want to jump in and ask that, so we make sure we address it. We've talked a lot about the challenges, we've talked about them leading themselves. It'd be really great to hear a success story. Do you have one you can share with us?
Oh, absolutely. Let me quote a client in our last session, end of last year, he summarized this development. I realized leadership is 90% mindset and 10% tool set. And my biggest development, he said, was getting a new perspective on myself and on the team. And this has changed everything. And it's really amazing, because when I started to work with this person, when we started the coaching process a year ago, he was overwhelmed. He actually disliked his own company. He victimized himself. And as a result, the business was stuck, and he was quite frustrated. And a year later, everything had changed. He had become aware of his deeper values. He aligned the business model with that, so that he really now loves the business he's doing. And he worked on the beliefs that were limiting his actions. He took the time to get his team to know and discovered a lot of strengths that weren't available to him before. And so he started to trust the team fully. And now, instead of being everywhere, he really focuses on the leadership tasks, and his team starts flying. And that's just amazing. And it's a lovely work to do. I mean, it's so enriching. Yeah.
And what is
great to
yeah, so for the business itself, I mean, he obviously got a new perspective. For the business itself, it seems like it went on the journey with him. So like he basically achieved the success he was looking for. Can you go a little bit into that?
Yeah, I think that's actually the funny thing is, and this is why also the self-development is so important. Actually, every business is the mirror of a founder. If you're an unbalanced, unhappy person, you have an unbalanced, unhappy team, and your company is stuck. Yeah. If you're balanced, if you know how you deal, then the company is happy. And if you go this process, it's quite natural that once you start your own development, the company will follow. And this makes it a rather natural process. As you grow, the team grows, in its attitude, and the company grows. And that's the amazing part.
Laura, you've taken some companies to IPO, so maybe you have a story to share there as well.
Speaking from what I've seen, just my own experience as a managing director in a company that grew to an IPO, and seeing how much time there was actually available to those of us who are leading. I mean, happy company is really important. You need your team behind you. You need your organization to grow. And when I look at that even more in the context of what we discussed last week with the Great Resignation, I could see that this is unbelievably important these days. Dorothea, for startups and growing at this point, they need to keep their talent. How much of this is how does this kind of happy leader, happy team affect their ability to retain and attract talent? Does it come through?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we see that if leaders are really able to actively build trust, hand over responsibility, develop their people, then you create workplaces where people can grow. And in the end, why do people leave? Because they realize there's nobody who's really caring for them. They realize that they don't grow with the company. Leaders that have this growth attitude create this environment where people want to stay, where they want to contribute to the bigger idea that is there. Yeah? And the Great Resignation you usually have in places that, well, are not this way, that might even be toxic, where organizations that are low on trust, where people are stuck in their development, where they cannot take responsibility. People want to move things, they want to be responsible. So these companies might still grow, but it will be hard to retain talent. And these companies, if they grow, they often just grow because there is the founder or management that keeps on pushing. And actually, these companies always remind me a little bit of the old hero Sisyphus. Pushing and pushing, and as soon as they let go, everything's dropping.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And they have to let go. You have to move forward to get those investors and stakeholders and partners and be a presence for the company as the leader of, or a team of leaders of this company. So you've got to be able to let go.
Yeah, I found it really I found that really funny when you told me the story, Dorothea, was where it wasn't just pushing, it was pushing the rock up the mountain, and then you take a rest and let go, and the ball rolls right back down the hill. I think that's really a good description. But speaking of stones and tools, what I'd really like this audience to go away with is some tools and mindset tools that you can give them on how they can take the first steps to achieve this and why they should use them. So like really tangible tools that we can take away. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. And I mean, as I told in the case study, mindset comes first and foremost. And I always talk about the mindset of a growth leader, which has a big vision that he really can transport to the team, who has an open heart, which means understanding yourself, understanding the team, who has a strong back, who's able to hand over responsibility, hold people accountable, and who is constantly learning. So learning mindset, that's working on your mindset, getting there, understand how people tick, understand yourself, understand your conflict styles, how you're going to work on your personal energy management. So if you have that, you already gained a lot. But there are also tools that actually help you, and that's an interactive process in a way that also help you to learn about, to implement your mindset. And the most important part is the one-on-one leadership tool set, which starts with learn to listen and ask questions instead of just making demands. Yeah? Learn a structured way of handing over responsibility. Make sure that responsibility does not get back on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. Then learn a way of giving feedback that really touches people. Yeah? And ideally, you learn to have very effective one-on-ones with your team, because this is kind of the vessel in which the one-on-one leadership takes place.
Mhm.
If you excel in this, then you will be able to really hand over responsibility, and that frees you for the bigger leadership part, with this vision, culture development, structures. But the essence is really this one-on-one leadership.
Fantastic. And you know what? We have a couple of more questions from the audience. So I'm going to jump to those, Dorothea. It's going to be a little bit off what we were talking about, but I would like to address them if possible live. Speaking about the hidden values, what do you mean by that, and how can they be brought to the surface? That was back when you were talking about the leading yourself.
Yeah, hidden values. What I realized is, and that most of the people can name a few values they have, but often we have values we are not really aware of, because again, they are forbidden by our limiting beliefs. For me, for example, to be very honest, it's ease of living. Yeah? I always was pushing strongly, putting a lot of energy in everything. And how can you discover them? It's a nice exercise you can do very easily. Take 2 or 3 people that are really inspiring you and start to write down what it is actually that's inspiring you with this people. So for me, it was family, but also leaders who had that easygoing way. And if you write this down and then connect the different things that you like, you will realize what's important to you. Because people who are inspiring you are always reflecting what you would like to be, but what you are not able to pin down. So it's
always external feedback is always the way. The other one, we are running out of time, but I will mention it because I will mention that I'm an introvert, so this becomes very relevant. In tech startups, you often find the real tech cracks as founders, but some seem to be rather introverted and not the best at leadership. Some are rather entrepreneurial character and not the CEO type of person. How many founders in this area do you see being successful CEOs of a scale up? Now, before you answer that, I just want to say, I learned to be extroverted when I'm on screen or when I'm on a stage, but I'm a very introverted person and I take time back. So I think skills can be learned, but actually, Dorothea, I think you actually mentioned the 10,000 hours to me at one point. So perhaps you want to expand on how many success stories do you see when people aren't natural leaders, let's say?
As I always say, leadership is a skill that can be learned, like marketing, like tech. I mean, the techies learn how to code. I mean, I would think I can never learn coding, but it's probably also untrue. So it's a skill you can learn if you start to work on it. Then it's about, I mean, mastery. It's like the 10,000 hours you need to put in exercising to become a master. That's true for everything. Yeah, that's the one answer. And the other answer is there are a lot of introvert leaders out there. And strong leadership starts on a one-on-one level. And this is where introverts actually excel. Introverts are very, very good at listening to what's happening outside. And the listening skill is something a lot of more charismatic leaders are not good at. So actually, I'm an introvert myself. I'm very much in favor of the listening skills and the abilities of introverts in becoming great leaders. So that's not a no-go, contrary.
So there you go. And in fact, I would say that there is actually a study done on how many of the leaders in big companies are introverts. So I find it really interesting because the humility comes as well as part of good leadership. And there's something about introversion that actually increases that. Anyway, that aside, we've got another minute. I just wanted you to share your last insights before I sign us off. What would you like them to take away? What would you like the audience to take away?
Well, actually, the key takeaway, and it's all comes down to growing. If you don't grow the business won't grow. So if you have that in mind, you can refocus your ambition to grow into leadership and make sure your business really starts flying. And fantastic. I wish you all the best on that.
And so for anybody who is listening, I will be posting this video on YouTube and it will be on Spotify by tomorrow noon. Along with that will be the links to connect with Dorothea or find out more information. So anybody who signed up will get an email with all that information anyway. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Thanks you for that wonderful session.
Bye.